This is Earthbound. Originally known as Mother 2 in Japan, the Super Nintendo role-playing game would wind up becoming something of a cult classic. What lied beneath that colorful box was a pretty giant masterpiece, complete with lively and, at times, confusing characters, a soundtrack you could never forget, and more. With all this, Earthbound would keep you busy for a while. According to HowLongToBeat.com, the average playthrough beating the game with the minimal requirements is 28 hours. That's one of the longest games made for the console, which makes it that much more surprising when I tell you that there's a way for people to beat it in under an hour. There's a chance you may not be entirely surprised, as this channel is known for covering glitches in games that can help you beat it fast. So how different could this one be? But that's just the thing. If you look at a speedrun of the game's main category that uses glitches, you'll notice that instead of using the glitches to get right to the end as fast as possible, the player will go through various spots seemingly at random. It may seem counterintuitive to go back to a previous spot where you already were, however this comes with a logical explanation. There's also the many times a runner will make random menu movements. You may think these are accidents, but this speedrun goes much, much deeper. It already sounds like a lot, so let's rewind back to the beginning. It all starts with the new game file creation. Earthbound, as you'll come to find, is very reliant on luck. The luck, or RNG, which is short for random number generator, is the main factor that decides if certain enemies will spawn just before you reach an area, as well as anything else that can be considered random, such as if you'll land a punch on an enemy, or if it'll miss. In the guide I'm referencing, made by both Oxwaz and Octopus Cal, there are many specific mentions of what to do to try and manipulate the RNG to their liking. It helps them out greatly by cutting out a lot of the random factors which could result in time loss, but it can be pretty tedious to do in real time. Nevertheless, the names are set and the game finally begins. You start out as a young boy named Ness from a town called Onnet, who was woken in the middle of the night by a loud crash. Naturally, you wander out of the house to go see what it is, but the police have barricaded the place, meaning it's back to bed for you. Later that night, you're awoken by another noise. This time it's your annoying neighbor, Pokey. He lost his little brother, so you leave the house once again, this time to find him. When you recover the brother, you notice a light coming from the meteorite that made the crashing noise. You're then greeted by a random bee who informs us that he is not actually a bee, who tells you about a great evil that will soon engulf the earth, from the mastermind named Gygus. The not bee named Buzz will join you and fight off evil, until he gets swatted to death. You then receive an item that's important to start your journey, and just like that, the great less than an hour long adventure begins. So with an RPG like Earthbound, you're meant to get into various enemy encounters, fighting them off while gaining experience points to help you level up so you can better defend yourself and be a more threatening adversary. But this runner Octopus Cal doesn't exactly do that. After having done super precise movements during that intro event and up until now, the game's internal RNG values are set just right so that Cal can make use of a glitch, which involves overloading the amount of 2D characters and objects that the Super Nintendo can have on screen. This will force one of these barriers in the lower part of town to be relocated up into the street, allowing you to walk freely to the next area where you're usually meant to explore only after you beat the main boss of Onnet. Thus we move right to the next town, Tucson. Upon arrival, you'll withdraw some money from the ATM at the nearby hotel. Now here's where things get even more interesting. Octopus Cal buys a skip sandwich, an item that will increase your running speed for a short period of time. He'll hold onto the item for now, and move to a specific part of town near a ledge, where he performs a glitch I haven't yet mentioned, something I'll refer to as cliff walking. The way Earthbound is laid out is a flat 2D plane with restrictive barriers preventing you from walking all over the map. It mainly uses these 2D graphics to give the illusion of depth, but in fact you can cross over what's supposed to be a giant vertical wall. By essentially wiggling along these solid barriers, you're able to just barely slip through the cracks, eventually allowing you to walk on what's supposed to visually be much higher ground. There are some setups to clip through these barriers, but these often involve very quick and precise movement inputs that can be harder to get down. Now to get off this cliff, you'll have to utilize cliff walking again, but this time you'll actually need the skip sandwich to get you past this barrier. After more wiggling, Cal enters this tunnel, only to be brought back to what is now the third town of the game, Threed. So far there's been a lot of skipping areas by overloading how many graphics the console can put out, as well as getting past what's supposed to be solid barriers. However, this is where things start to slow down, but since this run is supposed to beat the game quickly, we're merely just getting started. After a zombie violates you by staring into your soul, an odd-looking lady will roam outside the hotel. It may not make sense, but if you follow her, you'll eventually be ambushed by zombies and ghosts. But wait, who's this? This is Paula. She's one of 3 other characters you're supposed to gradually add to your party along the way, who will be able to help defeat Gygus. You meet her trapped in a village that's home to a cult just outside of Tucson, to which, after disassembling said cult, you eventually find a key to rescue her. Going back to the present time, you're stuck and need to seek out the 3rd soon-to-be member of your party, Jeff. This part plays out normally, though Cal takes a pop gun which he'll eventually sell, along with 2 other things, in order to buy 2 of the Skip Sandwich Deluxe. These sandwiches will increase your speed even more and for longer than the regular Skip sandwiches. This is needed as we're gonna cliff walk again, with this walk being one of the hardest throughout the run. This helps skip a ton, including a normally unskippable cutscene which lasts about a minute and a half. Cal then saves and resets the game, which also helps reset the RNG values that would normally decide what's supposed to be lucky or unlucky occurrences. This ensures that the next enemy encounter will go according to plan. Another cutscene later, Jeff will arrive in Threed, meeting up with Ness and Paula. After more usage of the menu for luck manipulation, Ness will eventually wind up with a cold, which is the most important part. The cold will gradually bring down Ness's health. With luck manipulation on Cal's side, the game will allow him to escape the fight so he can set up what is probably one of the biggest glitches in the entire game, which involves sets of stairs. Upon barely touching the stairs, Cal gets a separate message stating that due to the cold Ness contracted, his condition is critical, and if left untreated, could kill him. Since this message interrupted the normally unstoppable walking downstairs animation, the game freaks out and puts Ness in an odd state. This state will allow him to break free of all the boundaries in the game, allowing him to roam the abyss. Though it isn't exactly an empty abyss. As a matter of fact, after moving just a short distance away, by using the Soundstone, the object that the Not Be Buzz Buzz gave to you moments before he passed, upon closing the Soundstone's special screen, you'll see that Cal just ended up in another completely different location, one that takes place further into the game. So how is any of this possible? It may be explained by one simple picture. Okay, maybe it isn't simple, but it's a picture. This is actually the entire layout of the game's worlds. To help condense everything to fit on a Super Nintendo cartridge, the developers placed every single location across one giant map, only loading in that location's visuals when you properly enter the area. Using the Soundstone, you'll end up telling the game to load in the visuals of this new area that you're now in. Though Ness and friends will still be in the out-of-bounds walking state, it can be fixed either by walking on a different set of stairs or opening a door. Octopus Cal is now in Summers, an area that normally takes place after the 4th main boss of the game. This, of course, is not where the final boss of the game lies. You might be asking, well, if you can go out of bounds, can't you just get to the end of the game and be done with it? While theoretically you could get there, even if you were to fight Gygus, it won't allow you to beat the game. See, normally, you would fight him for a while, however after some time, you can no longer finish him with normal attacks. Instead, you're required to pray as Paula, and it's during this sequence of prayer that you get glimpses of the people you met and places you've seen along the way. Their prayer power will help you defeat the evil and beat the game. Though if you decide to skip key points in Earthbound, which skips the game's normal setup, placing certain characters and other invisible things known as flags needed for the final battle, you'll end up soft-locking the game during some of these prayer sequences. Since the game wasn't set up to handle these final sequences, you'll be stuck in a state of limbo. This won't progress the game further, meaning you can't do anything at this point. This is why the route for the speedrun seems to be all over the place, so that way it can set the game up to handle the sequences and beat the boss. In Summers, Cal will once again use Ness's cold to his advantage. He had eaten the skip sandwich he bought in Tucson to raise his health only a little bit. This would allow the game to bring up the critical health message again, which occurs once your health gets below a certain level due to an illness, such as the cold. Once again, it's time to go out of bounds. This time though, Cal is moving down while out of bounds, rather than up. Depending on what part of a staircase you perform this glitch on, you can either move only higher or lower than the staircase itself. If you were to perform the glitch from the top of the staircase, you could only walk to the other lands above where the stairs are, as by attempting to walk below it, even if you're far away, the game will force you back to that staircase. And vice versa for the bottom of the stairs. Now his next objective is to fall down a hole. This hole is from after the 7th main boss, which drops you straight to the area where the 8th boss remains, the one just before you fight Gygus. According to a member of the Earthbound speedrunning community, JTolmar, the scientist that also happens to be Jeff's father, Dr. Andonuts, will only be able to spawn in this area called Saturn Valley once you fall down this particular hole. Dr. Andonuts is needed to appear in Saturn Valley during the first prayer sequence. And on top of this, some other events need to happen to finish the game. These other events will start right after Ness succumbs to his cold. You'll respawn back underneath Threed during the last major event the game for sure remembers you experienced. Once again, Octopus Cal gets into an encounter with a zombie to catch a cold so he can go out of bounds using the stairs once more. Though this time, we enter an odd land called Magicant. This land only takes place, usually with Ness being by himself, after you beat the 8 main bosses in the game. These bosses I've been referring to are known as the Guardians, as they block you from reaching your sanctuaries. Each sanctuary will give you a short musical piece which will be recorded in your soundstone you got from BuzzBuzz. And as a result of beating these bosses, Ness gets knocked out cold and enters the land of Magicant, which takes place entirely in his mind. As he does in Magicant, Ness suddenly dons his pajamas while walking around, which is much different compared to the Japanese version, where "Good grief, he's naked!" That aside, after more strategic menuing to despawn enemies that'll prevent Ness from any unnecessary encounters, which could go south really fast, he eventually fights his Nightmare, a reference to a statue which was supposed to be fought earlier. The Nightmare is normally pretty stacked with health, and you're usually meant to fight it yourself once you're much more leveled up. But since Paula's in your party, she can use her prayer to help eliminate the enemy. Ness's Nightmare has a chance of emitting a glorious light, and by using Paula's prayer, there's a chance that her prayer can cause a heaven-rending sound to take place, which will make the enemy feel strange. This glorious light the Nightmare will produce will then be turned around back to itself due to the enemy's strange feeling caused by Paula's prayer, which instantly kills the boss. Like the game, this boss is heavily reliant on luck, but the RNG manipulation that comes from precise movement both in the worlds and during the menus can help with that. Ness then levels up a ton, followed by yet another level up session all the way to level 39. From having just been at level 1, that's really not bad at all. Now this is where the glitches pretty much stop, as the rest of the game can be done like normal. Well, mostly. After retrieving a piece of that meteorite from the beginning of the game, which will help you power a machine to move you through space and time, you'll end up in this bright cave with robot bodies, as it was necessary to put your brains in the robots to move through time. The path in this cave to the final fight is normally littered with super annoying enemies, but some menu manipulation can help despawn them. The only thing that Cal does differently is spying on a bionic kraken, which has a 1 in 128 chance of finding something called a gutsy bat. This bat will help increase your guts level, which can give Ness a much greater chance of being able to deal a ton of damage to an enemy. This will help speed things along, as just before you fight Gygus, that annoying neighbor who would tease you throughout the game shows up to try and stop you. Using even more menu movements and Paula praying to put the enemies to sleep, you're able to take down Pokey and the first Gygus phase, before Paula's prayers are required to beat the game. It may be uncomfortable to look at, but once everything is said and done, the game is finally over. What is supposed to be a roughly 30-hour game has now been beaten in 44 minutes and 12 seconds, which is the current world record for this category. It's insane just how much thought is put into this run, with all the chances of stuff potentially going wrong due to human error, even in this airtight route. It's unfortunate you couldn't skip more stuff to make the run even faster, but the glitches that exist to make this possible are already crazy as it is. The only thing that would make it crazier is if there were some sort of a glitch where you could go to the map's edge and repeatedly check a corner while holding a button on a second controller to eventually have garbage laid out in the text box, which from there you could precisely perform a sequence of inputs, letting go of the second controller button and then pressing A and B either 11 or 13 frames later, causing a debug menu to pop up. Yes, while I was hypothesizing just now, it turned out to actually be a real thing. Why does this happen? Well, it's complicated to explain. To quote another user, Pebblepossum, from the Earthbound speedrunning Discord, the game code is just entirely shitting itself when you do this. It's very tricky to get it to shit itself in just the right way before it gets everywhere. Using this normally inaccessible debug menu, you can do a number of weird and cool things, but the one that's most important is the one that involves warping to the post-credits sequence, wherein Pokey's little brother Picky hands Ness a letter written by Pokey, teasing him to come and get him once again. The world record for this debug menu category, as of this video, clocks in at just 11 minutes and 31 seconds. If I'm being honest, I did have a lot of fun with this game. Sure, this video may have been about the ways people skip parts of the game, but that doesn't take away from the fun of playing it casually. In fact, this game is now more readily available than it ever was, even playable on Nintendo Switch's online service. Even if you're not a super big fan of RPGs, I'd recommend checking it out. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, share your thoughts in the comments below. But with that being said, thank you for watching, and until next time, take care and peace.